entering a fierce new phase. McCain aides told the Washington Post they will focus on what they call Obama's liberal record and questionable associations. Exhibit A, William Ayers, a Chicago professor once part of the Weather Underground, the radical group which bombed government buildings during the Vietnam War. In California yesterday, Sarah Palin took off on Obama for his ties to Ayers.
Thank you so much. This is not a man who sees America as you and I see America. Our opponent is someone who sees America as imperfect enough to pal around with terrorists who targeted their own country.
The Obama team hit back fast and hard. In a new ad out this morning, they call the attack a shameless act of desperation from a struggling candidate.
Our financial system in turmoil. And John McCain, erratic in the crisis, out of touch on the economy. No wonder his campaign wants to change the subject, turn the page on the financial crisis by launching dishonest, dishonorable assaults against Barack Obama. Struggling families can't turn the page on this economy, and we can't afford another president who's this out of touch.
It is getting heated out there, and here to continue the debate, key players from 4 key battleground states: Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell, Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty, and Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio and Mel Martinez of Florida. Gentlemen, welcome to all of you this morning.
Good morning. Thank you, George.
Senator Martinez, let me begin with you. Florida has one of the highest foreclosure and unemployment rates in the country right now, and 4 Florida polls since the financial crisis hit all show Barack Obama ahead. So, as the Obama campaign charges, is your campaign desperate to change the subject?
Well, look, for sure that the economy hurt the McCain campaign in Florida. Florida's been very hard hit, as you just stated. The fact of the matter is that there's much to be done yet. The fact of the matter is that Florida is far from being over. Florida's going to be close all the way to the end, and John McCain has an awful lot of things going for him in the state of Florida. Whether it is the fact that the older population really favors him strongly, or the fact that the Jewish community does not trust Barack Obama's foreign policy, or that the Cuban community is irate and offended by the fact that he would sit down to talk with the Castro brothers. There's any number of things about the population of Florida that all seem to trend in McCain's direction. McCain was well ahead in Florida before the economic crisis hit. I believe once this campaign gets beyond that immediate crisis, that Florida's going to come back to the McCain camp. One thing I will mention to you, George, that's very important to consider. Barack Obama has spent almost $13 million on television ads in Florida. John McCain has barely spent a couple of million. Once McCain engages in the air in Florida, Florida's a television state. I think that will also turn some numbers.
But do you believe
it's amazing, by the way,
Senator? But do you think that talking about William Ayers is what it's going to take to turn it around? Senator Obama has deplored what Ayers did when he said he was 8 years old, and he says they're friendly, but they have not been especially close.
I think the important part is whether they're truthful charges or not. Not about what Barack Obama did when he was 8 years old, but what occurred when he was 35, 38 years old and was initiating his political campaign. It's about his judgment in who he associated with during those years and right on into his political campaign. But the bottom line on Florida is that for having spent $13 million in Florida, that race is still within the margin of error in all the polls. And in fact, until a few days ago, McCain was well ahead.
Senator Brown, is this issue going to cut in Ohio?
Well, you've seen a 26-year Senate veteran morph into an angry, desperate candidate in the last few weeks, especially in the last few days. And it just kind of makes me sad, George, that John McCain and Sarah Palin are resorting to these tactics. When I've done about more than 100 roundtables in Ohio, in most of the 88 counties in the last year and a half, and people are talking about the privatization of Social Security. People are talking about trade, what trade has done to Ohio, 200,000 lost manufacturing jobs in the last 8 years. People want to go and talk about issues and what we do. They want to see the difference between the two candidates. And I think that's why polls in Ohio are showing increased support for Barack Obama, because voters are paying attention to the difference on John McCain wanting to privatize Social Security, want to continue these job-killing trade agreements, wants to privatize health care the same way that he supported the deregulation of the banking system. On all these major issues, there's such a sharp contrast between John McCain, who wants to continue the policies we've seen in the last 8 years, and Barack Obama, who has very different ideas of a very different direction.
Governor Pawlenty, it sure does sound when Governor Palin says of Obama, this is not a man who sees America as you do. It sure does sound like she is questioning Senator Obama's patriotism.
George, I think it goes to the issue of judgment. And you know, this individual, Bill Ayers, is an unrepentant domestic terrorist, and as you noted, and as other news organizations have noted, he was involved in the bombing of the Pentagon, or attempted bombing of the Pentagon, the Capitol, and plans for other domestic terrorism. Now, Barack Obama at the time was 8 or 9 years old or whatever, but that's not the point. The point is this same individual, Bill Ayers, hosted some sort of political event at his home for Barack Obama when Barack was running for state legislature in Illinois when he was well into his 30s. So this isn't about Senator Obama being 8 years old. This is his judgment when he was starting his political career in Illinois in the mid-1990s. And I think when people realize this is about 10 years ago, 14 years ago, it goes to the issue of what kind of judgment would allow a unrepentant domestic terrorist to host a political event for you in his home, in the terrorist home.
Governor Rendell, what's your response to that?
Well, let me say this. It is, as Senator Brown said, very sad. In March, when he became the presumptive nominee, Senator McCain said he would run a decent and honorable campaign. He hasn't, and it's going to get worse. First, they lied about Senator Obama's position on taxes, and now they're starting to do the politics of personal destruction. The American people, and here in Pennsylvania, we're not going to buy that. The issues are too important. The economy, health care, what's going on abroad, Social Security. The issues are what people are focusing on, and that's why this has gone bad for the McCain campaign. And no matter what they talk about, Reverend Wright, Mr. Ayers, you name it, it's not going to wash, because when this country's in trouble, people are focusing on who's got the best plans to get us out of it, and that's Barack Obama.
The McCain campaign has not brought up Reverend Wright, and so I want to put the question back to Senator Mel Martinez. When the North Carolina Republican Party back in the spring did use Reverend Wright in ads, Senator McCain condemned it. Do you think it's appropriate for Senator McCain's allies now, and there are some ads up by independent groups that use Reverend Wright, do you think it's appropriate for his allies to bring Reverend Wright into this conversation?
Look, I believe that it's appropriate to talk about Barack Obama's judgment about his, how he got to where he is today. The American people are going to have to make a choice about who they trust with the presidency of our country during some of our most difficult times, whether it is internationally or domestically. And you know, for all the talk about the negativity, the ad that you just ran at the top of the show that the Obama campaign is playing on McCain is not a particularly nice ad, and it's frankly not true. You know, Governor Rendell, when he mentions about not being true about Barack Obama wanting to raise taxes on families that make $48,000, that's just wrong. He did vote to raise taxes on families that make only $48,000.
Mel, the Tax Policy Institute, a bipartisan think tank, has made it clear that Senator Obama's plans for 95% of the Americans will cut taxes 3 times more than Senator McCain's. That's a fact. You can look it up on their website.
Let me bring it. I want to bring the issue.
But the fact is, how did he vote? How did he vote when he had the opportunity to raise taxes on families making $48,000? The fact of the matter is that his record may be different than what he's saying today, which is part of the reason why there's a lot of contention now about whether this is getting personal. Is because we're talking about judgment, we're talking about character, we're talking about leveling with the American people, telling the American people the truth about his background, about who he is, where he wants to take the country.
Mel, you and I serve in the same body in the Senate, and you know how those votes work. And John McCain's voted for increased taxes dozens and dozens and dozens of times, and all kinds of different fees and taxes and all that. The fact is, look at the plans they have. Barack Obama wants to cut taxes, as Governor Rendell said, for 95% of the public, a middle-class working family tax cut. John McCain wants to continue the same George Bush policies and tax cuts for the rich. I'm looking for one example, one time where John McCain would say, here's where I differ from George Bush. George Bush's economic policies of the last 8 years, here's where I differ from him. In the future, what I propose, there's no major difference between Bush economic policies, deregulation of Wall Street, deregulation of health care, privatization of Social Security, tax cuts for the rich, job-killing trade agreements, on all these issues. John McCain wants to...
What's the answer to that, Governor Pawlenty? Go ahead. Governor Pawlenty, go ahead. Respond to that charge.
Well, it's to say that Senator McCain's record on economic matters and related issues is the same as President Bush is simply not accurate. If you look at at Senator McCain's record, he differs from President Bush on climate change, on energy policy, including, by the way, the 2005 administration's energy bill that Barack Obama voted for and Senator McCain voted against. Senator McCain has had differences with the administration on spending, on earmarks, on importing prescription drugs from Canada, on the conduct and prosecution of the war, on torture, on nuclear arms proliferation, on many other both domestic, economic, and international issues. It is not accurate or fair to say that Senator McCain's record is the same as President Bush's. That is simply not accurate.
Excuse me, Senator, I want to bring the argument to health care.